Morning, we're back to the Twits and we just got up to the part. Do you remember Mr. Twit had been sticking bits onto the bottom of Mrs. Twit's chair and her walking stick? So he was making her feel like she was shrinking and her walking stick was up here. So we're now on chapter 10 and it's Mrs. Twit gets a stretching. I wonder if you've worked out how he might be able to stretch her. So Mr. Twit led Mrs. Twit outdoors where he had everything ready for the great stretching. He had 100 balloons and lots of string. He had a gas cylinder for filling the balloons. He had fixed an iron ring to the ground. "Stand here," he said, pointing to the iron ring. Then he tied Mrs. Twit's ankles to the iron ring. When that was done, he began filling the balloons with the gas. Each balloon was on a long string, and when it was filled with gas, it pulled on its string, trying to go up and up. Mr. Twit tied the ends of the string to the top half of Mrs. Twit's body, so to her arms and her head. I'll show you the picture in just a second. Some he tied around her neck, some under her arms, some to her wrists, and some even to her hair. Soon there were 50 coloured balloons floating in the air above Mrs. Twit's head. "Can you feel them stretching you?" asked Mr. Twit. I can, cried Mrs. Twit. "They're stretching me like mad." He put on another 10 balloons. The upward pull became very strong. Mrs. Twit was quite helpless now. With her feet tied to the ground and her arms pulled upwards by the balloon, she was unable to move. She was a prisoner, and Mr. Twit had intended to go away and leave her like that for a couple of days and nights to teach her a lesson. Oh, that'd be a bit painful, wouldn't it? In fact, he was just about to leave when Mrs. Twit opened her big mouth and said something silly. "Are you sure my feet are tied properly to the ground?" she gasped. "If those strings round my ankles break, it'll be goodbye for me." And that's what gave Mr. Twit his second nasty idea. There she is being stretched. What do you think will happen if her feet come off the ground? Chapter 11 is going to tell us Mrs. Twit goes ballooning up. "There's enough pull here to take me to the moon," Mrs. Twit cried out. "I'll take you to the moon," exclaimed Mr. Twit. What a ghastly thought. We wouldn't want anything like that to happen. No. Oh, dear me, no. "We most certainly wouldn't," cried Mrs. Twit. "Put some more string around my ankles, quickly. I want to feel absolutely safe." "Oh, very well, my angel," said Mr. Twit, and with a ghoulish grin on his lips, he knelt down at her feet. He took a knife from his pocket, and with one quick slash, he cut through the strings holding Mrs. Twit's ankles on the iron ring. She went up like a rocket. "Help!" she screamed. "Save me!" But there was nothing saving her now. In a few seconds, she was high up in the blue sky and climbing fast. Mr. Twit stood below, looking up. "Oh, what a pretty sight," he said to himself. "How lovely all those balloons look in the sky. And what a marvellous bit of luck for me. At last, the old hag is gone for ever and ever." Do you think he's got rid of her forever and ever? Not sure he has. Chapter 12, Mrs. Twit comes ballooning down. I wonder what happens. Mrs. Twit may have been ugly and she may have been beastly, but she was not stupid. High up there in the sky, she had a bright idea. "If I can get rid of some of these balloons," she said to herself, "I will stop going up and start to come down." She began biting through the strings that held the balloons onto her wrists, arms, neck and hair. Each time she bit through a bit of string and let the balloon float away, the upward pull got less and her rate of climb slowed down. When she had bitten through 20 strings, she stopped going up altogether. She stayed still in the air. She bit through one more string. Very, very slowly, she began to float downwards. It's clever, isn't it? It was a calm day. There was no wind at all, and because of this, Mrs. Twit had gone absolutely straight up. She now began to come absolutely straight down. Who's at the bottom? As she floated gently down, Mrs. Twit's petticoat billowed out like a parachute, showing her long knickers. It was a grand sight on a glorious day, and thousands of birds came flying in from miles around to stare at this extraordinary old woman up in the sky. So that's our 3 chapters for today. The next one is chapter 13. Mr. Twit gets a horrid shock. I wonder what his shock is going to be. Is it just going to be Mrs. Twit coming down? Don't know. I'll see you next